everybody, what is going on? I am Maximus Rex and this is Big Baby Reviews. Today is Friday, it is McFarlane Day. Now, I know last review I kind of went over the last full comic McFarlane I think ever did, which was the Spawn Batman crossover. That was last week's review. Today, we're going back in time now, and I always find this interesting when I can do this. I did it with Rob Liefeld, where I went back and looked at his early Hawk and Dove stuff at the end of having gone through basically his whole career, and it's kind of interesting to just, you know, in a weird way at the end of what they're doing, see where they kind of came from and started from. So kind of like Rob Liefeld, what we've got here is an example of McFarlane doing something that I think is definitely more house style. McFarlane has talked about this back in the day, how he came in, did things the standard kind of Marvel way, and then slowly but surely worked in the things he wanted to work in to make what he thought would make the comics more interesting, more dynamic, you know, crazier layouts, that whole 90s vibe that came really from the late 80s originally. So it's a nice kind of blast from the past to see where he started from. And this period here is, you know, it seems like McFarlane's kind of jumping from Marvel to DC. I checked the dates. So he's doing Infinity Inc. in 85, 86. And then around 87, he's doing both Year 2 and some Hulk stuff. And somewhere around 1988, he's doing Invasion for DC Comics, just the first 2 issues, and then moves over to Marvel and on the Amazing Spider-Man at that point. So he's kind of working for both and then kind of locks it in with Marvel, I guess, once he gets on the Spider-Man title. So obviously 1987, Todd McFarlane is not the comic book household name that we know, you know, eventually in the 90s and today. So he's not even the cover artist on this one here, because back then he's just what I guess is labeled jobber, just a new guy coming in, and they've got kind of a more Marvel house style inker on top of him, so you'll see that the style is not quite there yet, although there are things. I was surprised to see how many things I kind of recognized as McFarlane isms or McFarlane tropes throughout this comic. So not too much comment on the cover, pretty just, you know, by the numbers cover by I don't even know who the artist is, and we're focusing on McFarlane, so let's have a look inside. So I thought this first page was very cool and evocative of Todd McFarlane's style overall. He is doing what I think wasn't quite as common back then, or the wide panels that go from left to right, just one whole strip. And he started kind of doing the vertical panels, not quite as extreme as he would later on, but he's already using them throughout this issue, you'll see. So those are the things you want to be looking out for. And the actual kind of, even though he's being inked by someone else, I feel like on this page, and especially with the Ghoulies, early Todd McFarlane, where he still had, you know, a slightly higher amount of noodling than most artists. You can kind of see on this guy's face, on the texture, on the hands here. So especially this ghoulish demonic character, I definitely see a lot of McFarlane in that, and it feels like the inker respected that. There's a weird effect here on this page where you see the silhouette of someone, but they also added in a screen tone behind it, so it kind of just kills the silhouette. And you can kind of see it a bit clearer here, but I do feel like the screen tone is kind of a mistake. Either leave it out or find a screen tone that's way lighter than this, so you've got obviously contrast between your silhouette and your screen tone that you're using. But you know, you'll spot a lot of those production snafus and Marvel's 80s comics. A shot like this, I definitely can see, again, just the McFarlane layout, the way he foreshortens things, and still quite a bit of noodly detail for the mid-80s here, as opposed to most Marvel house style books at the time. So I think the pacing and stuff generally is a little more kind of Jim Shooter-ish Marvel house style, but he's still trying for some different angles, at least on these first few pages here. And I feel like later on the pages get a little more kind of calm and subdued. So I don't know if the editor saw a few of the first pages and say, whoa, chill out a bit there, buddy. Because I do think these are still pretty, not as extreme and interesting as McFarlane would get, but they're definitely slightly more interesting than maybe what's being published at that time. Got the long vertical panel here, the McFarlane. He is using it already. And yeah, just the cropping on this is very McFarlane, you know, leaving the complicated bits out here. Over, but you know, he left them in here, probably used some photo reference, so good on him for drawing a helicopter. Not something I think he's drawn a lot of. Interesting color choices. I don't hate it where like he's all in blue here to make him stand out, obviously almost like he's more of a silhouette at that point. Who do we got on credits? Peter David is the writer, Tom McFarlane The penciler, Jim Sanders, is the inker. And like I said, I feel like on these pages, he's being pretty much sticking to what McFarlane laid down. Although when we get into the close-ups and stuff, you'll see the difference. So, you know, I definitely feel like this is a McFarlane pose as well. Here, the art gets a little more classic as far as the inking goes, kind of subduing the McFarlane more extreme kind of elements of his art. Again, at this point, not fully developed, but a lot of noodling. And yeah, once we get to this page, I feel like the tech is pretty good, but it's been very much cleaned up by the inker, and the faces get a lot softer and just have generally, like, I don't recognize much McFarlane here, maybe other than in the framing of the panel. So those are examples, and definitely the inker is helping out McFarlane. You'll see on the lady faces. I can, you know, it's somewhat akin to what he was doing on Infinity Ink, I would say, right? You can see a little bit of it underneath, but I definitely feel like the inker is trying to help him out to make the ladies a little less odd looking. Drawing ladies was never McFarlane's strength, but he did improve over the years. But, you know, early on like this, I feel like he was getting a lot of help from his inkers. The checkerboard background here, you know, he started using already. So I wonder if that was on Infinity Ink or on this title. I don't remember seeing it on there. Again, I do recognize this as a McFarlane face. It's just the inking on top, the aesthetic on top is completely different now. So whereas on those first few pages I felt like, you know, we got the McFarlane noodling, we're not getting it here anymore. We're still getting kind of the rubbery, cartoony look of the characters that McFarlane's known for, but inked in a very, like I said, 80s house style manner. So it's a little jarring and odd. I will say though, the technology here, 100% McFarlane, inked maybe a bit cleaner than he would do, but I can definitely recognize the elements that he usually uses for this kind of stuff. I think that's a great panel. It's a hard kind of thing to pull off, and probably spent a lot of time on that. The opening of this box as well that he's getting into, and the intricate kind of, you know, his version of Kirby tech, I guess, because, you know, no matter what, all this stuff eventually, you know, he's probably maybe looking at John Byrne as well, who does his own version of Kirby tech. It's just that, yeah, that imaginary machinery, right? Everyone has a different way of kind of doing it or different approach to it, but that all somewhat seem to go back to Jack Kirby at some point. Still see again in the faces some McFarlaneisms in the expressions and stuff, the cartoonier elements. And then, you know, maybe from about here, I start to notice that you start getting less down shots and up shots and interesting angles, and everything's kind of just head on, you know. Still have a down shot here, but everything else is just kind of a straight up kind of sitcom shot, I guess is what I'd call it. Storytelling, like I said, very mid shot, very Marvel mid 80s, you know. As I've talked about, McFarlane, you know, deciding to go a little more standard early on and slowly working the stuff in, as they say in the wrestling world, they kind of do that as well. It's something where, you know, you've got ideas, but the editorial kind of mandate is that you do something else, and then slowly but surely you work in stuff that you know is probably going to work. And with McFarlane, he was right, at least aesthetically with his art. The more he, you know, leaned into his what he wanted to do art-wise, the more popular he became. And the less like everyone else his style looked. Like, this is pretty, you know, this wouldn't make you make this artist stand out, I think, as opposed to every other artist in the mid 80s at Marvel. Not really. Little shots like this, again, you can kind of see the beginnings of the McFarlane style, but most of these pages pretty darn standard, and I'll go again faster through these ones because that's, you know, here's where we get what maybe McFarlane has more problems with still at this point. I've always said that I think his foreshortening is not his strength, and here's kind of an example of it. It's not horrible in any way. It's very serviceable and it works, but there's just something odd about it, right? There's always been something anatomically a bit weird about some of the poses that McFarlane puts his characters in that aren't quite realistic, but still, for, again, whether they work or not anatomically, they also help make his style distinct, right? So even this fight scene, again, is pretty head-on and pretty boring, I gotta say. You know, he does pull in the wide ones here, where now it starts to look like, you know, 70s cinema, maybe, is kind of the vibe I'm getting here. It still looks very old school. And there's some pages, I would argue, like this one here, that he probably drew fairly quick, because I do feel like the inker's doing a lot of the heavy lifting on the actual finished look of the faces. Right? So maybe you know, McFarlane's rushing through this part for the deadline, get to the good stuff, which is going to be, you know, there will be an appearance by the Hulk soon in this issue. But everywhere else, it's pretty standard fare. Again, little pangs of, I recognize the McFarlane here in the hands. The beginning of those, you know, kind of sequences that McFarlane, he's done this where he zooms out and stuff. He's not doing it here with the actual zoom. It's just kind of, there's a slight zoom here and it's repetitive. Maybe it's him first trying these ideas out. Don't know how well they work here, but eventually, you know, in stuff like in Amazing Spider-Man and on the Spider-Man title, he'll have these kind of sequences where it works a lot better than what we're getting here. I mean, it's serviceable, I guess, but not that exciting. So finally, the Hulk does show up. Is he drawing G.I. Joe in around this time? This seems very G.I. Joe-ish as a kind of a dune buggy. So our zombie character comes out, and again, you know, the McFarlaneisms tend to stand out more because I guess it's a creature and he's skinnier and he's got kind of a decomposing body. The inker's more accepting of the weird McFarlane anatomy, right? And more of his style comes out when he's drawing this character here. Even the Hulk, I find, is not very McFarlane yet. We'll see in later issues where he inks himself. There's quite a big difference with what we're seeing here. But when it comes to this Bogman or whatever, decomposing dude, I don't even know his name because, again, I'm not interested in the story at all. Just lots to read that doesn't seem that interesting. But again, the close-up shot, this is McFarlane. This shot is classic McFarlane, is what I'm trying to say. And, you know, he's doing it at a smaller scale, but he'll start doing those pages where that 3/4 face is over here and taking up most of it with a few insert panels taking up most of the page. He's using the checkerboard hatching and then tried cross hatching up here, which does work, but maybe gives it a more traditional kind of old schooly look that he's trying to get away from slowly. The checkerboard for some reason feels more in an odd way, you know, late 80s, early 90s kind of, you know, thing that came into vogue. So again, not so, you know, interesting on the action sequences either here. You know, we've got some pretty head-on shots, profile, whatever. Even this could have been way more interesting. At the same time, are they working Marvel manners? Marvel method, excuse me. Is Peter David giving him a script with the number of panels and stuff? I don't know. But I definitely think something like this could have taken up more space on this page and been more of a focus, because that's pretty cool. Idea of pushing this character off and his arms and legs staying stuck on the Hulk, kind of gross and stuff. I feel like McFarlane, you know, on late era Spider-Man or on Spawn would have done something quite gruesome here. Again, maybe because he's having to play within those Marvel editorial rules that he's taking it easy. You know, I guess once he becomes popular and he starts selling lots of books, he's got a little more weight in pushing those things that he wants to get across. Yeah, very McFarlane over here. This one as well, I think, is, you know, overall, could almost believe this is early McFarlane inking, right? Where everything else kind of feels, again, like Marvel House style inking. A little bit of McFarlane coming out here on the face, I think, with those extra lines and stuff. He's getting there. He's working on it. And this shot that we're going to see so many examples of later on, drawn by Tom McFarlane. So maybe this is his proto, you know, foreshortened Hulk jumping up in the air shot, because there's a lot of those. The crop is a bit kind of unfortunate, I guess, for the arm. I don't know what else he could have done. Maybe draw Hulk a bit smaller in there and get that arm in there. But yeah, it just looks a little odd to me. Other than that, the pose is fine. Like I said, he's going to reuse that a lot. And this last panel just seems kind of odd because obviously I get it. Storytelling wise, it's fine. It gets across the point that, you know, that stump of a body is still out there in the desert. And, you know, the buzzards are coming to eat them, the vultures, to eat the decomposing flesh. But it's just kind of an odd choice. I guess the idea was I don't have to draw too many of the birds, right? And just crop most of the, again, complicated bits out. And the more fun parts of drawing anything is the head, right? Even in drawing an animal or a human. So maybe that's his idea there. And it was pretty quick to get through this panel, not having to get too complicated. Maybe a few down here, very small and kind of silhouette, just to give a bit more depth in the image. And the idea there's more than a few of them here. 1, 2, 3, 4. You would think there'd be a few more. So that's all I'd suggest. Maybe a bit of a wing in silhouette over here, right? Eventually he'll learn to use those tools more and more. Maybe that's something that's missing here too, is that use of layering that McFarlane has, that he eventually works in with the smoke that he uses, right, to create layers, and with Spawn with his cape. That's pretty obvious, but not quite there yet here, but definitely interesting to see where he started off at Marvel. And what does art look like at that point? So there you go, guys. That is my review of the Incredible Hulk issue 334. If you're still subscribed and you're watching all the videos, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thanks for sticking around. If you're watching but you're not subscribed, please do so below. It only takes a quick second for you. Really helps the channel out, helps us grow, helps get us out there to other people who are into comic books just like we are. So everyone out there, thanks for watching and have an awesome day.
Like, subscribe, like, subscribe.
King Comics presents Big Baby, Volume 1, Issues 1 to 13, 204 pages of story and art. King Comics also presents Star Crasher one-shot, 32 pages, cosmic sci-fi surrealist adventure. You can find these fine comics at KINGCOMICS.CA, at MaximusRex13 on Instagram, or on Facebook, MaxRex or Big Baby.